If the network adopts your block as being the main block, then yours is currently the head block and everyone builds on top of it. So they will actually both appear. It's just which one the next block comes on top of. And once you get 6, that's you. The rule of the network is once you get 6 on top of it, that's you sorted. Actually, maybe 5. I think yours is included in 6. Okay. But the order really matters. If I've got £20 and I spend 15, and then I try to give 10 to Darryl, for example, he's not going to get his £10. But if I've got £20 and give 10 of it to Darryl and then try to spend 15, we're going to get a completely different outcome here, because one of these transactions is going to work and one's not. And that is why order is so important in blockchain and in Bitcoin. Because if the transaction fails, you're going to get nothing. The transaction will be rejected. And you could put that to use quite cleverly to actually steal money off people by letting them think that you've paid them the money, but then having a pre-mined block that comes before it, which you're then going to use in order to say, hey, I didn't actually spend that money, I gave it to myself. And they're tricked into thinking that. That's called a double spend attack. I'm not going to go into too many details of it, it's just worth being aware of. They are quite difficult to do, but they have been seen occasionally in the past. Just be aware of them. Wait for a couple of confirmations, so blocks on top of it. Once there's a few blocks over the top of that block, you're good. So if you're buying a beer, don't worry about it. If you're selling a house, do worry about it. So how do we create blocks? We create them in the proof of work. We've talked about creating blocks, but we've not mentioned how it's actually done. We need to do a deliberately slow task that we can all agree is just as difficult for you as it is for me. If we don't have that, then someone gets an advantage in making the blocks. And Bitcoin's about people who don't necessarily all trust each other. We need to make sure that the difficulty is equal, and therefore it's a fair challenge. And we use this to reach a consensus. We need everyone to reach a consensus in blockchain to do anything. And this is really pretty difficult, even amongst friends. So reaching a consensus on where you go to dinner or to lunch can be pretty difficult. Imagine trying to do this across about 10 million people who can't agree on basically anything. Try it with people you can't necessarily trust, because people in blockchain don't really trust each other because there's no need for them to, and they don't actually know who they are. So in Bitcoin, we use hash prefixes as a proof of work. So remember those cryptographic hashes we talked about earlier? Small change to the input, big change to the output, can go backwards. Well, if we asked you to go backwards by making lots and lots and lots of attempts at the input till you got a particular output, or a particular start of the output, that would give us a way to do a task that we can all agree is pretty uniformly difficult. It's really wasteful, though, of power and resources, but it works. It lets us all agree that this process is about as difficult for each other. Whoever's got the most computing power will win pretty much every time. I say every time, it's almost every time. There's, a randomness in the universe, etc. But if you're doing this for business, what you want to think about is perhaps a closed blockchain. It will avoid inefficiency of proof of work, but there will be issues. Bear in mind, if you build a closed blockchain, it can be much easier for someone to come along and mine on it. So you're going to need to make sure, if you are doing a closed blockchain, that you can't just apply hash power and mine. You'll need to completely close who can participate. Here's a number. This is the closest we're going to get to mass today, I promise you. Would anyone care to guess? This is a number of hash calculations in Bitcoin per unit of time. Anyone want to take a guess as to the unit of time? That's a really big number. I think it's 2,958 trillion or something. Anyone want to take a guess what unit of time that is? Minute. We got minute.
Second.
It's second. Yeah. That is the number of hash calculations taking place per second in Bitcoin. It's about 1 or 2 nuclear power stations worth of power are being used just to keep it ticking over. That's quite a lot. I think that's the big nuclear power station.
Is that the agglomeration of all of the servers doing
Yes.
this?
That's all the servers that are all the miners that are participating. It's now not servers that are mining, it's dedicated hardware that mines. But if you take the amount of power that's being used for that, based on the current estimations of hash power, you're talking 1 to 2 nuclear power stations, if not more. And that's quite a lot. So let's talk quickly about some uses of blockchain. So in general, when do you want to use blockchain? If you need to know the order that things happened in, and nothing ever needs to be updated or removed, that's a good time to use blockchain. But you also kind of want to have people who don't necessarily trust each other. If you don't have this lack of trust, it might be worth just using a database. Blockchain's not always the solution to everything. It's worth making sure it is the right solution to your problem, because there are issues with it. For example, it's a bit slower normally than a database, and you don't necessarily, you don't get the same performance out of writes because you have to mine blocks. But any other time, probably best not to use blockchain or to look at alternatives first. It's not always going to be the silver bullet to your problem. Let's talk quickly about contracts though.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
Sorry, you were just saying there in terms of other applications,
Mhm.
where does the mining come in another application using a blockchain?
So if you've got an application running on a blockchain, the application is going to produce blocks, that are going to produce data that's going to end up in blocks, okay? You need the mining in order to approve the next block. If you're building a completely private application, you don't need to use mining, you can do it another way.
So, don't you just need the hash of the block to produce the next one?
Yes.
Mining the generation of that hash.
Mining is the changing of a random number inside the block to make it meet a certain set of rules. And these rules are to make it fair who makes the next block. If you don't care about that fairness in who makes the next block, you don't need to worry. If you do care about the fairness, you need to make sure that it's equal opportunities to make the next block. So only if you're allowing the public to mine do you have to worry about that. So to look quickly at contracts, I don't think there's any lawyers here necessarily, but there might be on the internet. But we'll talk about contracts because they're fun. A public ledger of all agreed contracts would be quite useful because nobody can tamper with them. But there's a problem, because if everyone can see the contract, then everybody knows the prices we're charging everyone else, and that's not necessarily ideal, because sometimes you might want to give someone a wee discount and mates rates kind of thing. But what if we could do partial commitment, so we could prove after the fact what we'd agreed upon, but without necessarily having to put the entire contents out there, so everyone can see that someone's getting a better price than someone else. Another use would be patents. You don't necessarily want to disclose what's there, you just want to timestamp it. If something's in an old block, you know it existed at that point in time. The blockchain advances at about 1 block every 10 minutes, and it recalibrates itself so that it does meet that time. But where next? Smart contracts could be quite useful. I'll tell you how to do that in a second. Self-enforcing contracts that are automatically enforcing. It could speed up doing business. You could link together your deals. You could take transactions and make them happen at a certain point in time based on other conditions that are happening somewhere else. So really quickly, a contract can have a balance of funds. This could be some kind of property or token. When you run it, rather than having a private key, we run the contract code and we pay out the funds if the conditions are met. Otherwise, we don't do it. Imagine a safe that's got a coin slot on the top you can put coins and money into, but you can't get it out till the safe decides to open. That's effectively a smart contract. But the risks are you've got to get it perfect first time. You can't edit the contract once it's made. So fail fast, fail often, the mantra of a lot of startups. Please don't apply it here because you'll end up losing a lot of money. In fact, Ethereum, which is a kind of big smart contract platform, their valuation had a little bit of a nosedive because there was a small incident where somebody managed to steal quite a lot of money. And standard trading graph here, price across the top, volume across the bottom. Oh look, lots of volume, big price crash. Big hack, a big mistake in the contract, and it caused a lot of trouble. Be very, very careful if you're making smart contracts that you can't edit. In terms of scalability, everyone can handle 8 transactions per second globally. That might change with some of the changes that are coming through. It's not likely to grow rapidly. MasterCard and Visa can do 2,000. Keep it in mind. It's a lot slower than necessarily other systems, so you don't get the same performance. And in terms of the size of the blockchain, these are gigabytes down the left-hand side. Megabytes. It's now, the blockchain is now, it was 59 gigabytes a year ago. It's now 103 gigabytes today. It's grown 7 gigabytes since the 1st of January. It grows really quickly. You can barely fit this on your bog standard SSD. That makes it much more difficult to participate, and it means it's going to end up more centralized because people are going to rely on storing it on a server rather than their own PC. Again, just want to be careful of because it keeps growing and it's difficult to get rid of the history. In terms of security of funds, your funds only secures your private keys. It sounds fairly sensible, but just keep it in mind if you are encouraging users to use it. Your reputation is only as secure as your keys as well. But if somebody loses their keys, how do they get their money back? The answer is they can't, really, unless you've done complex things with multi-sig or similar. There's usability challenges. Keep that in mind for your users. Look out for them. We want people to be able to use the technology without encountering, oh, I've lost all my money, I've lost my life savings because I can't remember my password. It's a tricky problem, but it's one that's going to need solved. In terms of private blockchain, I mentioned them earlier, but there's limitations for some use cases. Making your own is possible, but keep it secure. Just to go back to a point there, because I think the slide has been taken out, if you do want to do partial commitment, what you do is you put the hash of something in the blockchain. And anyone can verify the hash is correct, but they can't work out back what the contract was. So if you've got a contract, you put the hash of the contract in the blockchain, and you can come back and show it was agreed upon because here's the hash of it, but otherwise no one can tell what the terms were. So it's a good way to do that and to get a timestamp. So in conclusion, just a quick rattle through these. Number one, security. I'm a security engineer, I have to say it. Blockchain's a means to an end, but it's not the end itself. Get your implementation, if you're doing anything fancy, get it reviewed by experts. Once it goes out into the public, it's really easy to attack. There are lots of people out there who love nothing better than to break the thing that you have put your heart and soul into. They will do it, they will find a way, they're ingenious, and they don't get bored very easily. So be careful, get it reviewed by experts. Come on, Charlie, if you want to talk about this sort of thing. In terms of trust, blockchain, Bitcoin shows the financial system without trust. It's looking at ways that we can start to displace the trust from where we normally have it in a transaction and put it in other places. We can displace the trust, but remember, our business processes are generally based on trust. Keep that in mind. Most of the world is analog and based on trust. Rome wasn't built in a day. Take it a small step at a time. Some building blocks, it's a building block for complex services. You can build all sorts of cool things on top of blockchain. If you need to stop data being tampered with and you need to keep it in order, blockchain's probably right for you. Otherwise, take a look at a database. I'm not here to sell a particular technology. A database might give you better performance and be a bit easier to use. Scalability, think about it. Bitcoin can't currently scale. If you need to make loads of transactions, either look at the Lightning Network, which is coming out soon in Bitcoin, or look at other solutions. Be cautious of designing a committee though. Just because it's complex and lots of people agreed, doesn't necessarily make it the best thing. And again, security, yes, again. Moving to blockchain technology is not a small change, it's a really big, it's almost a step change actually. Think about the GDPR, a big important piece of legislation is coming up in the future. This is going to bring serious fines for public bodies and businesses. Be very careful of their definition of personal identifying data. It's pretty broad, it can cover all sorts of things. Be very careful about this if you're building anything that people are using. And beware of the hype though. Lots of people will be out there to sell you blockchain as a solution to your problems, to do very expensive consultancy for you, that sort of thing. Blockchain is a really cool technology, but it's not perfect. It has its limitations. Make sure you're aware of the limitations and keep them in mind. Don't be fooled by hype. If anyone's got any questions, I'd be more than happy to take those.
You could just explain GDPR?
Yes, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. So it's a European piece of legislation. It is going to be in place before the UK leaves the EU, whatever's going on there. And that will take place because it's going to take place in May 2017. May 2019, is it? It applies to anyone. So if you wish to trade with the EU, 2018, yes, 2018, May 2018. If you wish to trade with any EU person, you effectively have to be registered with GDPR, you have to follow the rules of GDPR, and you have to make sure that you're adhering to all the requirements. And a lot of these are pretty strict.
Can I address that issue?
Yeah,
A lot
certainly.
of people around there saying that GDPR is not in force at the moment, it comes into force next year. That's wrong. It is in force now. It only applies to states next year. So at the moment, you can sue somebody, but you can't take it to the Data Protection Commissioner. And that leaves companies in a double whammy position right now because they're sandwiched. If you're breaking GDPR at the moment, it's serious. Plus, the fines are, I think, 2% of last year's annual turnover.
Global turnover.
Global turnover, or 10 million pounds, I think it is, or euros, whichever is the larger.
Can it be 4%?
I think, yeah.
It changed. They're meant to.
But yeah, GDPR is serious business, and as a small business, you could be sued once it takes effect in any EU member state. And if you're not based in the EU, you need to appoint yourself a GDPR representative who is based in the EU to act on your behalf.
But GDPR is as much an opportunity for
Absolutely.
as a threat.
GDPR is a huge opportunity.
It speaks to the two converses of privacy of data and the requirement to share data around Europe. So blockchain can be an answer to that.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else?
Really, opportunity for lawyers.
Yes. No one else, anything else? I was just going to mention, if anyone is interested in events looking more at blockchain, there's a Girl Geek Scotland and Legal Hackers Scotland blockchain hackathon. It's kind of end of March, 26th of March, and then there's another part on 23rd of April. It's female friendly, but anyone's welcome to attend if you are interested. If you take a look on the website, it might be a good chance to get an idea of some of the actual practical implementation aspects and actually build something on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Welcome for squeezing 8 minutes to squeeze 85 slides into 20 minutes, so well done, thanks for that. So next up is the guys from Wallet Services. We've got Peter, Stuart and Alan. The guys are just back from San Francisco. They tell me it was at a blockchain event, it wasn't a jolly or anything like that. And they've been at London Blockchain Week as well. So the guys would like to share their experiences of what they've learned. So I'll hand over to you guys.
Thank you. I think Peter's going to lead.
Grab a seat.
It's been a long day.
Right, welcome to the Blockchain Industry Roundup from Wallet Services. Move to a more convenient spot. So, as Darryl mentioned there, we recently had the opportunity to attend a couple of blockchain conferences, one of which was Construct in San Francisco. We're a blockchain startup. We've been going for about 6 months, and I know that there's a few faces who were here last time, where you will have seen the very polished presentation which Alan gave about about our plans to make our blockchain as a service platform available in developer preview at the end of March. So for those of you who haven't been online at wallet.services, to hammer your name in and subscribe to our newsletter, please do that if you want to have that platform made available to you at the end of next month. So that presentation was extremely polished. Today's a little bit more, kind of ad hoc. That's a good word. Thanks very much. Because what we wanted to do, as a startup who are building a blockchain platform, and we want to build a community of developers to use that to make their blockchain innovation a bit more accessible, so that they can make their development quicker and easier and reduce risk. So it's very important for us to understand, what's happening out there. What are other players in the industry doing? What are the big financial enterprises doing? What are the other blockchain startups doing? What are the large blockchain groupings and consortia up to? So that's why we made the decision to go off to San Francisco on a whistle-stop tour. We were there for just a couple of days and learned a huge amount. So we went to a conference called Construct. It was the first time it had been run. It was run by CoinDesk, who probably you'll be familiar with CoinDesk, the news site. They also run Consensus, which has been running for a few years. This was the first time Construct had run. It was quite a small grouping. There was only about 300, 250 people there. It was held in a very cold aircraft hangar down by the shore near the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. We were literally freezing in there, but the conversation was pretty hot, and that kept us going. We were invited, and we were delighted to have been invited there. It was an invitation-only thing for developers, so we felt duty-bound to come back and try and explain a little bit about what we learned. So what we're going to try and do, we've made a few notes. I'm going to try and talk through that and point to my colleagues, Stuart Fraser and Alan Keir, when we want to delve down into particular issues. So this group, the Blockchain Meetup, it's all about interaction. So fire up if you've got any questions, and we'll try and answer them as we go along. So I'll take a wee seat now and set up a little panel. So Yeah, so the conference was a great global cross-fertilisation of ideas. We saw a lot about some of the real-world use cases and had the opportunity to speak to people about them as we went through the conference. And for us, as a small company who need to form partnerships and connections because we were planning to scale globally, it was a great opportunity. We kind of felt that it was quite a significant moment in tech. There were a lot of grey-bearded luminaries there from the early days of the emerging internet and web technologies. Guys like Chris Allen, who you got a good conversation with. They were all there, they were present, they were fully participating and moving forward the standards that are emerging in this area. We heard all the plans from those big blockchain tribes, the Bitcoin tribes, the Ethereum guys, what the big financial services consortiums are up to. And there were attendees there from all over the world. There was a big placement from Japan, and we've subsequently heard about their plans to develop a tokenized version of the yen. People from Australasia, following the big announcement from the Australian Stock Exchange. People from all over Europe, and of course all over the corners of North America, from Canada and New York and San Francisco. There was also a lot of blockchain startups, a lot of well-funded startups there. So it was really a good opportunity for us just to see where we were in that kind of spectrum of cooperation and competition, that cooperatition, as I think they call it in the States. And we got a lot out of that. So Alan, at this point, I think you wanted to say a few words about what your definition of blockchain, didn't you?
Yeah, so it's really important here to frame exactly what blockchain is, because we're going to talk a lot about it, and we're going to talk how it's been applied. So you've already had an excellent introduction. So I just want to kind of frame. So I've written down my 2-sentence explanation of blockchain. So essentially what I say is blockchain is a protocol operating over a peer-to-peer network that makes use of a shared database. That's essentially what the ledger is. It can be used to facilitate secure cooperation between 2 or more participants without any form of mutual trust, provided that you trust the integrity of the network. So the reason I wanted to say that, because I think it bears mentioning that blockchains, probably their best feature is they support the interaction between entities that don't particularly trust each other. So if you need the kind of read-only anti-tampering database storage, in addition or a method to allow 2 entities to securely cooperate, then that's why you'd use it, and that's why that's mainly the reason for many of the services we're going to talk about.
So Alan was keen to do that because him and Greg compete around their blockchain 101. He did the last one at the Build Geek event, and I think that was the second time I'd seen you explain blockchain technology, Greg. I never tire of it. It improves every time. Well done. So anyway, back to Construct, and so we kind of came back feeling quite chuffed with ourselves because we saw a community that was settling on the direction around blockchain technology in a way that we kind of validated the approach that we are taking in building a platform. So it's always good to be validated and also to feel that you've got a bit of a lead. And we learned a lot over the 2 days of the conference. And what I've done is I've grouped things into 5 themes, and we're going to kind of talk through these things. First of all, we'll talk about our overall impressions of the blockchain community at the conference. There was quite a libertarian view. We stepped into a post-Trump inauguration United States, so there's quite a view around how blockchain is going to save the free world, so we'll say a bit about that. We'll talk about how the industry is seeing the proliferation of public blockchains and the direction of private vision blockchain technology, and the requirement for interoperation. That seemed to be a really big focus that was coming out of the conference, and a focus of a lot of the startups that we met there. There was a lot of speculation about market adoption and the timing, so we'll say a little bit about that. There was also a theme that came out that many of the participants saw blockchain tech as a solution to many of the internet's woes. The internet is broken, and we as a blockchain community can fix it, was the sort of theme there. And finally, although we saw a lot about the early use cases in financial services, public services seem to be a big new application area, and we'll finish off by saying a little bit about that. Now, if I can operate my slides from here. So, yeah, there was a lot of optimism for the future. There's much more to come from blockchain. As one of the key architects of Bitcoin said at the conference, the most amazing applications are yet to be discovered. So right from the kickoff, the conference talked about these kind of libertarian themes of the Bitcoin's bank-free world. That kind of shone through. And well, Stuart, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the opening keynote was from Ryan Selkis of CoinDesk, and he was opening up, talking about the post-Trump America. We literally arrived the night before into San Francisco airport with all the protesters out the front protesting the immigration ban. So it took us a while to find our bags and just generally get through the system. But we were all they weren't angry. There was no grief like that. We had a good chat with the people in the BART on the way back into San Francisco about what was going on. But this view that government can't necessarily be trusted. There was an announcement at that time where Trump had taken down EPA and some of the environmental websites. So a number of academics had got together all the environmental data and mined it into the blockchain, so that there can't be an alternative version of reality. Reality is what we believe it to be, what we can prove it to be. So it was interesting to see that open libertarian view that within the community, that everybody was willing to work and share in a way that promotes openness, promotes cohesiveness, which, given it was only a few days into Trump's presidency, was quite an interesting viewpoint, and not entirely necessarily what we were expecting, but it was good to see. Good to see.
So that's the blockchain community. That was very high on the list of priorities. So as a group who are equally as interested in driving kind of social good and social benefit as they were of obtaining high valuation for their companies and a really good exit for them and their investors. So all that was quite interesting, and it kind of manifested itself as talking about sovereignty over personal information, how blockchain could help with that, and how it could address some of the means of cyber attack that we're seeing on the internet today. So day one of the conference talked about the big blockchain projects, Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I was actually quite impressed by seeing what in both accounts seemed to be quite cohesive core teams who had pretty detailed plans of how they were building features and release schedule and so on. They didn't quite see what all the fuss was about and some of the perceived shortcomings of those public blockchains. So I think the Bitcoin guys got straight into talking about the SegWit. Stuart, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah. Day one of the conference, certainly the morning, was very much a more kind of classic industry conference where people would get up and start telling you about where their product's at, what they're looking to do, We had Corey Fields from Bitcoin giving a good update in terms of the process in the community, how SegWit's coming along, how they're talking to the miners to make sure that a lot of these systems will be adopted over time. Possibly more interesting was Hudson Jameson of Ethereum. He was going through some of the future Ethereum releases, talking about Metropolis, about improvements to smart contracts and gas management, so we can't see some of the attacks that have happened before. Everybody was talking about zero-knowledge snarks. That was just, I don't know, the hype du jour or whatever. They're also talking about in the Ethereum world about Serenity, which is one of their future releases, which has got a proof of stake, Casper they call it, mining algorithms, and block sharding, trying to get block mining time less than 4 seconds, a lot around some of the technology they want to bring out. Also, it has to be said, some of it was quite detailed in explanation of what they wanted to achieve, but there was no ETA for release. But there was more. There was Zcash we're up talking about. ZK Snarks got to get it in the Americanized way. But there was also Blockstack, Interplanetary File System, Hyperledger. The Hyperledger guys were, I think this is coming from like the IBM background, the Linux Foundation. They were really engineering. They were really, this is what we're doing, this is how we're releasing it in really quite a solid way. There were other companies up talking about their technology. I'm not necessarily name them because it might come up later, with the occasional comment from the back of the room saying, show us your code. It's not the first time we've heard. So there's this idea that although blockchain community's out there, there are a lot of people, there will still be some people who are maybe riding the hype. But it was interesting to see. It was very cold, as Peter had said, 8 degrees or something inside the hangar, but it was always very interesting. It kept us there, everybody was involved, there was lots of good feedback. I'm not sure if we got any of the storyboard pictures, the cartoon pictures, but we'll maybe share them afterwards. There was lots of good information had come out, and if there was specific stuff, then we'll see if you can remember it.
So, interoperability, as I mentioned, was one of the big challenges that came out in conversation during the conference, because overall consensus is that the future is going to proliferate many public and private blockchains for all sorts of different purposes. So the biggest problem is how you enact activities across all these blockchains together. So, Alan, I know you had some views on this and want to talk about some of the companies that were met. So,
yep. Again, just to fill you on what we mean by interoperability, given time, we're going to have lots of blockchains, lots and lots and lots. Everybody's going to have their own. They're all going to store data, and they're all going to be used for different purposes. But eventually, we'll return to the situation we've got now, which is we'll have lots of secure data islands where data is replicated between all of these stores and isn't being reused. And because of that segregation, companies can't work together like they should. So there was a lot of companies looking at different ways that they would deal with that. So I've prepared a couple to talk about. The first is Cosmos, and essentially they've had quite a unique idea. Essentially what they do is set up a blockchain and use it as a hub for other blockchains. So essentially you have this one blockchain that you tie lots of other ones to, a bit like side chains, but implemented in a different way. It uses proof of stake, and essentially what you can do is transfer, say, an asset or a document or whatever you've got stored to another chain by locking it in, shifting it onto the hub, and then using the hub as a decentralized escrow mechanism. So this hub will essentially, let's say you wanted to transfer from Bitcoin to Ethereum, say, on the one side it'll lock in some Bitcoin, the other side the Ethereum, it'll do the switch and then unlock both. So that was quite an interesting one. Another one that were there were called Gem OS. And essentially they took a bit of a different route for doing that. They essentially built an enterprise layer on top. So instead of trying to actually handle interaction between chains, they've created other chains. For instance, they created one called a resource catalog, and essentially that would allow people to just store their data in the same old way, and it would store hashes of that data. I think that was mentioned earlier. They've added that with an identity registry, which was another big deal at this conference, self-sovereign identity, but I'll come back to that later. But essentially they're working on an identity chain to allow other blockchains to tie into that identity. So if you like, instead of doing some sort of direct interaction, you can do it, based on identity, which is pretty much similar to the OAuth that we see today, login with Facebook, that kind of thing. And the final thing they've added is access management on a private permission chain. So essentially what they're doing is they're using a blockchain to implement like an Active Directory and tie everything together using a more traditional security model. It's all quite interesting, but it is aimed at the enterprise and businesses. The final one, if I did, yeah, well, we'll leave that one there. I could talk about Hyperledger, that's a bit more complicated, but they offer another enterprise approach for linking together chains, but that's far more complicated. So I will just finish with a shameless plug about what we're looking to implement. And essentially, we are working on trying to get the best of all of these worlds. What we're looking to do is build custom blockchains with interchangeable consensus. I know Gem OS do that, and I think another couple of the guys were, and I know Ethereum certainly intend to make that interchangeable. So if you like, just bring your own when you grow your blockchain. Another one, yeah. So we'll also be building enterprise services on top, but what we're looking to do is open them up. So instead of hiding these things behind APIs, we're going to hand out clients, and so any chains that we work on, we will of course provide open source clients and things like that. But yeah, it's quite a hot topic. Anyway.
Thank you, Alan. So that's the blockchain unicorn behind me, by the way, just in case you hadn't noticed. It's proving that it does actually exist, and that's where we hope to be one day in wallet services, perhaps, as the next unicorn, a blockchain unicorn from Edinburgh. And it's interesting because we saw signs of the market settling down, and actually signs of people actually being able to build businesses and make money out of this stuff when we were at the conference, because we saw that process that enterprise software goes through with software falling into categories and having this kind of multiplicity of vendors who aim at each category, and that's when you start to get the Gartners of this world classifying things, competition happening, and risk being removed from the buyer's point of view. So that was all very interesting for us as well. And in terms of the timing of all of that happening, we heard quite a few opinions from various of the private permission blockchains vendors that were there. And Stuart, do you want to say a little bit about what they said and where we see the market, how we see the market maturing and when?
Certainly. So the feeling from most of the big development teams and from a number of the companies that we were talking to over the copious amounts of alcohol that was had in the evening, was that 2017 is the year of the proof of concept, that there are now some serious big problems being solved, but on quite a small scale, where like the Australian Stock Exchange with a bunch of remittance, everybody is getting the proof points in place in 2017, and the general view, certainly from Hyperledger and the other big guys, is that 2018 is the year of production. So this is the year that everyone's finally getting the released code out there, they've proved all the the basic proof points need to for big business to really start to embrace and deploy next year, hopefully. All the blockchains. I don't want to get on to my next bit.
So, I mean, that's been our experience. We in Wallet Services, we've built a solution for Scottish Government, and that's very much in the prototype mode. And they'll look to move that into proof of concept, hopefully this year. And so that's how we see the market emerging. So this year and next year, by the end of next year, we'll see some really interesting applications in production. At least that's our business plan. And then this stuff really becoming mainstream by about 2021. Question?
Can you say what the government are considering doing with it? Or is that secret?
We can talk about our solution. In fact, I think let's save that for just in a few minutes' time. We'll come to that. But where we are, we were involved in an accelerator called CivTech and built a solution which is currently finding a home in terms of how it will be implemented in government. So we don't have a timeline or exact location, which bit of government that's going to happen in, but that's the current sort of plan of record. And we'll say a bit more about our solution, which is called Sicker, later on. The next big theme that came out was the internet's broken. So how do we fix it? This network was originally devised as a distributed network, but it's become, from that distribution, it's become quite a centralized model in the web with, highly fortified islands of data which can be penetrated. And that old model of cybersecurity seems to be breaking down. So how can blockchain techniques be used to address things like identity systems, personal sovereignty over identity, sovereignty over personal data? And how can it be used to deliver more robust distributed protocols to make the internet work better? So there were a lot of discussions right across the 2 days on that, and we are particularly interested in the identity scenarios, and I think Alan is going to share some views about self-sovereign identity with us.
Yeah, so as promised, I'm going to talk a bit about self-sovereign identity, in particular what it is. And self-sovereign identity is probably the only identity model that's going to work going forward, and that's we own our own data, we store it, and we choose who to share it with, because we are the common, if you like, the common entity within any group or cooperating group of entities. So that's the way it's going to work. Yeah, so a lot of the conversations are looking at using blockchains to tie things like names, addresses, any other things like documents in your account balances to you via a blockchain, and use that as a linchpin in these multi-chain scenarios. So they were talking quite a lot about that, and there's a few that are working on their own implementations. In fact, there was a great number. So the ones I'll just mention were Decentralized Web. What they're doing is setting up a replacement for DNS servers, so domain name ownership, that kind of thing. Hyperledger are working on something. They're currently chatting about it a lot, and Deloitte apparently have one that they're going to launch when they can get it audited. But yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Alan. So, in our views on that are around how we can use blockchain to address data governance, and so, as I mentioned before, we on our platform we're building a general purpose cross-blockchain platform for developers, but we built a use case around data governance, and particularly around the enforcement and application for licenses and permits. So, Stuart, I'll let you talk about Sicker.
Yes, so Sicker is our implementation for the management of management of licenses from application through grant, enforcement and closing down, where from the outset there is a view of the entire process. No longer do you fill in a bit of paper, stick it in a post box and hope within 3 months that whatever government department managed to receive it, keyed it incorrectly and some process happened. What we know from some of the discovery work that the Scottish Government's been doing for their own investigation into licensing is that a quarter to a third of all phone calls to council and government departments are chasing up on where's my licence grant or whatever. There are 184 licensing bodies in Scotland, which is everything from Scottish National Heritage, which will give you a licence for bats in your garage, if you've got bats in your garage and things like that. It's a free licence, it costs them about 94 quid to process. But the process is the same. Once you look at the basic process of applying, getting approval, granting, verification, as Alan was talking earlier about, someone was talking earlier about licences. The model is the same regardless of its application. And we spent a fair bit of time in the unconference, the bit where you go off and have meetings and chat about stuff, talking with Christopher Allen, who is one of those internet greybeards that helped the standard for TLS, SSL and TLS. We had a good long chat to him with about our view of the use case, looking to use blockchains and things that aren't necessarily financial, because a large number of the companies that were there were looking at blockchains and pretty much only focusing on the idea of transfer of value rather than transfer of document, or as a secure management of life cycle type solution. So that was very interesting and informative. Not only do I now know a lot more about that, I also know that Christopher Allen plays a strange Swedish tuned drum, which if you want to, you can book time on the San Francisco Time Bank and learn how to play this massively expensive, less than 1,000 in the world, Swiss drums.
You're all right, I'll leave it. So, final thing we wanted to talk about was just the focus of the blockchain community in terms of industry. So I think the picture behind me, that's I don't think it comes up terribly well from far away, but there was an original artist who worked on cryptocurrency themed works, and that was a map of the financial world made up of terms of financial terms of business and ripped up credit cards. So we're going to
get some money, we'll buy one.
We'll buy one and put it on the wall. Yeah, we were quite impressed with that. So yeah, obviously the main focus today of a lot of blockchain startups has been in the financial services industry, and likewise for financial services companies themselves. They see blockchain as a bit of an opportunity. In truth, it's an opportunity and a bit of a threat. But what our opinion is we've kind of seen blockchain used as a way to make the financial services merry-go-round go round a bit faster, in much the same way as it's going at the moment. That seems to be what most of the early proof of concepts have done, both close to home and around the world. And they don't seem to look at some of the more fundamental potential innovations of blockchain in terms of making assets digital first, and looking at cryptocurrencies and all the things that they can do to speed the global economy and enable more commerce and so on. If there's anybody here who's got good ideas in that area, I would encourage you to look at something that we were at the launch event for in Scotland this morning. Citibank are running the T4I, Technology for Integrity Challenge. And although it's not blockchain focused, it's a lot around how blockchain techniques can be used to be applied to many of society and the financial world's problems. So that's something that's worth a look at. Come up with your idea for a blockchain startup, and you can power it with Wallet Services platform. So at the conference we saw there was a few announcements. Hot off the press was the ASX, Australian Stock Exchange, announced they made a big investment in digital asset holdings. So that was the one that was set up by the ex-JP Morgan exec, and they have quite a significant valuation now. We also, I think the company with the best white papers printed on the best embossed card was probably Chain. Alan, do you want to say just a little bit about Chain? It's quite interesting.
Yeah, so Chain, if you like, is a hybrid between Ethereum and Bitcoin, regular protocols. It is quite interesting. I haven't seen any code yet, so obviously I'm just going off their documentation, but initially they're going to release private blockchains. So they're blockchains that don't need to be mined based on the algorithm discussed earlier. So they don't really have limitations on scalability or number of transactions you can get through them. They use proof of stake, which is kind of like a voting system to allow these blocks to go in. So the interesting thing, so it's almost like they've taken Bitcoin code and just extended it a wee bit. So when you actually process a transaction in Bitcoin, the transaction runs through a bunch of validation rules, and they're applied by a stack-based programming language called Forth, or is similar to Forth. Anyway, so it's quite interesting, and that's where the idea that smart contracts and stuff could be done on blockchains. But in this particular instance, they've replaced the traditional method in blockchains and allowed you just to add Turing complete programs in there. So kind of similar to what Ethereum does, although more in the Bitcoin model where these programs are in transactions and they take another transaction as arguments. If you understand what that means, you know, you'll know how that goes. Otherwise, you can look it up. They've got quite a good explanation of that. And another thing they've done is they've swapped out the consensus models, made them pluggable, which is just like Ethereum, actually. And finally, there's an interesting thing you can do with blockchains, and it's called coloring. So when you send a transaction on a Bitcoin network, you can, through a little mechanism in the scripting language, add in your own metadata, anything you like, as long as it isn't too big. And that's called transaction coloring, and that's how companies like Counterparty allow you to create assets on top of blockchains. So they've actually added that, but in this particular case, they've made it a first-class citizen by adding a field in transactions for metadata. So that's pretty neat because, you know, even if you are just running transactions, you could, for instance, store context of purchase. So, you know, where you bought, what you bought, those kind of things, like a receipt.
Thanks, Marlon. So just finish off, obviously these, in financial services, there's been more money there to fund some of the development startup activity. So, you know, conspicuous there was R3, who were busy burning their way through whatever it is, £150 million worth of funding. They had hundreds of people there. They span kind of finance, banking, and insurance, so they're starting to lose consortium members there, and they had, I think, relatively few pilots to show for all of that investment. So at the conference, there was a lot more talk around some of the public services blockchain innovation that was going on. And since the conference, in February, we've seen a number of announcements around the globe of national governments who've actually got in behind specific initiatives and proof of concepts around use of blockchain in public services. So a few that I'm aware of, there's Dubai announced their global blockchain initiative. They've decided they want to be at the very forefront of this technology. It's a pretty ambitious attempt to establish the Emirate as, at the front of global, being a global blockchain leader. The Swedish National Land Survey project has announced it's moving into public testing in March. So that's a land register available to the public of blockchain in the developed world in March. We're doing that with a startup that I have no information on called Chromaway. We see Estonia continuing to show the way in digital first public services. Guard Time quite active in the Emirates behind the Dubai's initiative, and also recently announced some stuff that they're doing now with the Finnish government in uniting Estonian and Finnish citizen health records, so that health services can be transferred across the two countries. And even Russia's in the act. They've announced a formal blockchain strategy and have got a document sharing pilot going. So this is all, you know, starting to gather pace. So as you might imagine, we're trying to drive this in our work with the Scottish Government. I think IBM's recent report that they published said that 9 out of the 10 government executives they had polled planned investment in blockchain projects in the coming year. I think it was actually a North American study. I couldn't quite see the source of the information, but all shows that the industry is now kicking off and things are really starting to happen. So I wanted to finish with just a couple of calls to action, or questions really. The first and main call to action is go on to wallet.services, that's our website, subscribe to our newsletter if you want to be part of the exclusive club that can test our platform when we release at the end of March. So please do that as soon as you do it on your mobile phones before you go home, and we'll keep you abreast of all that we're doing. The other couple of things I just wanted to ask, I was contacted by SDI, Scottish Development International, their representative in the Nordics and the Baltic States, and they were wanting to know if anybody else planned to go to the Tallinn Blockchain Conference in March. It's just 2 weeks away. Please make yourselves known to me if you plan to go to that. Secondly, we will be attending Consensus in New York, which has been the big finance-oriented blockchain kind of business and tech conference of the past several years. We've been asked by Scottish Enterprise if we know of other companies who are planning to attend these sorts of events, and we'd quite like to support some kind of tent type visit that Scottish Enterprise often do. They do that for Mobile World Congress, where they support businesses to attend some of these things. So again, let me know. That's a bit further in the future. Let me know if that's something that's of interest, and I'll take that to SE. So with that, I think we're done. Is there anything else, chaps, you want to bring up?
Just say they had the bartenders were really good. They had 2/3 gin, 1/3 tonic, which was totally required because that place was freezing. Sorry.
Looks all right. So I think rather than doing like a formal Q&A with us up here, I think we'll just mix and mingle and finish off. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you guys, that's excellent, really good insight into what's going on in the world of blockchain at the moment, so thanks to all. Thanks again to Greg, that was fantastic again, hope you all enjoyed that. And just following on from what Peter was saying, if you check, there's another event in London that MBN Solutions are putting on. It's called City Chain 17, so it's following on from the success of Scot Chain 17, which was in November last year. Some of you may have been there, RBS and Gogarburn. So this one's in London on the 4th of April. So if you need any details on that, give me a shout, or you can check it on mbnsolutions.com. So thanks everyone for turning up tonight. I know the weather wasn't the best, so please feel free to hang around and help us finish off the beer and pizza. See you all again next month. Thanks very much. Cheers.